Page Kuf Yutes, opposite of page 236. Today we are starting Siman Yud Gimel. It's always exciting when we start a new Siman. This way, even if you didn't understand what we set up until now, there's always hope that this week you will understand what we're saying because we're starting a new Siman. So starting the Siman Yud Gimel in Iggeres HaKodesh. And it's a letter that the Alter Rebbe wrote. And the purpose of the letter, as is the case with many of the letters that the Alter Rebbe wrote, was a letter that Alter Rebbe wrote to collect money for tzedakah. The letter was written in Tav Kuf Nun Beis, which is in the years 1791 or 1792. And this letter also was strongly edited to the point that when I say edited, the whole ending of this letter, where the Alter Rebbe drives home the fundraising pitch, is taken out, but from that which we have over here in Tanya, we can see where the Alter Rebbe is going with this. The Alter Rebbe begins with the pasuk, Mar Rav Tuvcha Shert Safanta Li'Riyecha V'Goymer, and this is a pasuk from Tehillim, Kapitel Lamed Aleph, Perek Lamed Aleph in Tehillim. The pasuk says, Mar Rav Tuvcha Shert Safanta Li'Riyecha, which translates as, how great is your goodness which you have hidden away for those who fear you. This is David HaMelech speaking to Hashem. And then the pasuk continues, the Alter Rebbe alludes to it with V'Goymer, and the pasuk continues, Pa'alta lachoisim bach neged p'nei adam, that which you have done for those who take refuge in you, in front of all men. In other words, publicly. So the straight translation of the pasuk is, how great is your goodness which you have concealed, hidden away for those who fear you, and how great it is that which you have done for those people who take refuge in you publicly, who publicly take refuge in you. The Alter Rebbe is going to dissect this pasuk. And the Alter Rebbe understands that this pasuk is referring to two different types of people. Part number one of the pasuk, Mor Rav Tuvcha Shetzafanta Li'Riyecha, how great is the goodness that you have hidden for those who fear you. That's one type of person. And then there's another type of person, as the pasuk continues, those people who are Choisim Bach Neged Bnei Adam, those who take shelter in Hashem in a public manner. And the Alter Rebbe is going to say, there's something that we've spoken about in the past on different occasions. We know the Mishnah tells us that Lefichach Nivra Adam Yechidi, the why is it the Adam Arishon was created as a single unit. All other creations, all other animals were created Zachar Nekeva, male and female. And the human being is the only one who was created alone. And it's only afterwards, a little later on, when suddenly Hashem realizes, Oy vey, it's not good for man to be alone. The Eibush says, you know what? I have an idea. I'll make for him a wife. Oh, what's going on over here? all the other animals already, Hashem knew in advance that they need to have a male and a female. And obviously Hashem also knew that in order for them to perpetuate the species, you need to have a male and a female. With the Adam Rishon, no, it works is that first Hashem creates Adam, and then afterwards, almost as an afterthought, Hashem says, "Oy, I missed out on something. There's something missing over here. I need to make a Ezer Kenegdai." So the Mishnah gives several reasons why it is that Adam was Nivra Yechidi, and one of the reasons is that to tell you that just like to tell you the greatness of Hashem, that all of us were created from a single person, not two, a single person. Even Chava was created from Adam, so all of us come from the same DNA. And normally when you have, the Mishnah says you have a human being has a mold and strikes coins. Every single coin is the exact same. But Hashem had one single mold, the mold with which He created Adam Rishon, and nevertheless, every single person comes out differently. We're all different. We're all different in every which way. We're different in nature, we're different in temperament. And therefore, Chayav Adam Leimer B'Shvili Nivra Olam, every person has to say the world was created just for me. Think about that for a second. Because Adam Rishon was unique, and the world was created for him. Every single one of us is unique. And every one of us serves Hashem in our own unique way. So although that we say There's one Torah which is for all of us. Every single one of us has the same Torah. We all have the same mitzvahs. We all have to eat kosher. We all have to eat matzah on Pesach and shek lulav on Sukkah. And we all have to bench and we have to daven. And all the other mitzvahs. So a person might make the mistake of thinking, okay, so we're all expendable. I have to do mitzvah, you have to do mitzvah. You know what? If I don't do the mitzvah, so you're doing it. And then there'll be another person, another future generation. What's so terrible if I decide to opt out? Hashem needs a lot of people learning Torah, doing mitzvahs to light up the world. Okay, we'll manage without me. But the message of this mission is that no, every single person is unique, and every single person is different. Every person serves Hashem differently, based on who they are, and therefore that unique avodas Hashem, which you have, is indispensable. If you weren't unique, Hashem wouldn't have created you. If you were the same as someone else, then Hashem would have sufficed with the someone else. Why did He create you? Because there's something which you bring to the world. There's something which you contribute. A unique avodas Hashem, which is something which only you can serve Hashem in that way. And that's very important in terms of when we're looking at ourselves and we're looking into the mirror in a spiritual way and trying to figure out, why am I here? So obviously, why am I here in this world? I have to learn Torah, I have to do mitzvahs. There's that which we all have in common. But then we have to also dig a little deeper and figure out, but who am I? What's my tafkid? What's my purpose? What's my unique avodas Hashem? In the words of the Gemara, the one Tana asked one Amira asked the other. The names escape me at the moment. Avuch b'may havi zahar tfei. And says to him, your father, which mitzvah was he especially careful about? And the response came that it was the mitzvah of tzitzis. What does that mean? His father obviously kept all the mitzvahs, but he said, no, but what was your father's unique avodas Hashem? Which mitzvah was his unique way of serving Hashem? So, Klal Yisrael as a whole, every single one of us is unique. And then also, every single one of us comes from a different shevet, which means that in general our avodah of Klal Yisrael divides into 12. Every shevet had a different avodah. Ish asher kibrachasei beirach Esam, which is why Yaakov gives a different bracha to every single shevet, and that bracha was uniquely suited to what their purpose, their tafkid, and their unique nature was. And then there are smaller divisions. We also know Klal Yisrael is divided into 7, the 7 branches of the menorah, which also divide into the 7 midas. But the Alter Rebbe is going to tell us over here that the most elementary division of neshamas and Klal Yisrael is that there are really 2 types of neshamas. So, generally speaking, 2 types of neshamas, but obviously there are subcategories and subcategories and subcategories. And ultimately, there are no 2 that are alike. But still, if you want to make a very general distinction, a very general division, there are 2 different types of neshamas. And these 2 types of neshamas, we're talking about a horizontal division. In other words, it's not one is higher than the other. It's not like we had, earlier in Tanya we spoke about the tzaddik and the beinoni. So the tzaddik is higher than the beinoni. Over here, these are 2 neshamas. They're 2 different, what we call bechinos, 2 different categories, and both of them are equally valid. And one of them is what's called yamin, the right side, which is chesed, and one of them is smoil, which is the left side, which is gevura. Some neshamas are predominantly chesed, and some neshamas are predominantly gevura. And when the pasuk says "Mor rav tuvcha asher tzafanta liyireyecha," so obviously the pasuk is saying how great is the goodness they have hidden liyireyecha for those people whose neshamas are from the side of yira, the left side, the side of gevura. And then, as the Alter Rebbe will explain later on in the Perek, the next part of the pasuk is referring to the people who their neshama is primarily sourced in the midah of chesed. Yes.
The Sfaradim using this pasuk, Marav Tuvcha, for Ashkava.
Okay.
Every Ashkava, using the whole paragraph.
Right.
Why?
Because Pashup Pshat, the Pashup Pshat of this pasuk is, we're talking about the goodness which is hidden away in Gan Eden for those who serve Hashem. So therefore it's very appropriate for Olav Haya. However, as you know, every single pasuk has many, many different meanings, and here the Alter Rebbe is going to give us a different interpretation of the pasuk, which obviously does not in any which way detract from the simple meaning. In fact, this pasuk is famously quoted by the Ramban. There's the Rambam. When the Rambam talks about Gan Eden, and the Rambam says that the greatness of the pleasure of Gan Eden is not something that we can begin to imagine. And he says that for us to try to imagine the pleasures of Gan Eden is like trying to explain colors to a person who was born blind. In other words, sometimes we could say that we have a certain understanding of pleasure and say, multiply that by 10. Okay, so imagine the pleasure you have from eating cholent on Shabbos. Okay, so sometimes there's a schwachet cholent and shul, and sometimes there's a good cholent and shul. Now imagine an even better cholent, a 10 times better cholent. Right? Everyone's already salivating. And the same thing is in all other pleasures in life. We can always imagine more. But trying to explain colors to a blind person,
Can't.
There's no frame of reference. There's absolutely no frame of reference. My cholent is a frame of reference for a cholent that's 10 times better than mine.
Yeah.
But the Rambam says that's why David HaMelech exclaims, "Morav tuvcha shetzafant l'riyecha." How great is the goodness that you have hidden away for those who fear you. He didn't even bother trying to define it or describe it in any which way. All he can say is, it's so great. But more than that he can't say, because we can't even begin to understand or comprehend. Yeah, so that's the Pashup Pshat, but I'm saying the Alter Rebbe is going to take this Pasuk in a different direction, which applies in this world and not only to Gan Eden. So let's look inside. Hine, Bechlal Oivdi Hashem. In general, when we're talking about those who serve Hashem, Yesh Beis, Bechines, Umadregis, Chalukis, there are two different categories. And this is not because of habit. It's not it's not shot that this is something which I picked up in my father's house or in my mother's house, where I learned from a friend, or something that I worked upon myself. This is Mitzad Shodesh Nishmosam Lamaila. The reason why we have these two types of neshamas, it's because of the source of the neshama above. Mebechinas Yamin Usmail. Whether some neshamas come from the Yamin, some neshamas come from the Smail. As we know, all of our neshamas come directly from above, from Hashem. Hashem also has Chesed and Gvura. So someone whose neshama is Chesed, that means that their neshama is rooted in the Chesed of Atzilus, the Chesed of Hashem. And someone whose neshama is Gvura, that means that their neshama is rooted in the Gvura of Hashem, the Gvura of Kedusha. How does this play out practically? So Alter Rebbe says, the Hainu Shebechinas Smoil. What is the idea of the left side, the Gevura? Gevura is Midas HaTzimtzum VaHester B'Avedas Hashem. This expresses itself in two ways. Tzimtzum, which is contraction. VaHester means hiddenness, limitation and concealment in Avedas Hashem. What are examples of that? One example is V'atznei alachas chulu. The idea that when we do mitzvahs, in b'chukoisai teilechu, so b'atznei alachas, when we do mitzvahs, it should be done in a modest way, unpretentiously. No one has to see. B'mistarim tifke chulu, whereas the pasuk says that there's the idea of crying in private. This is something actually this pasuk is talking about Hashem crying in private, but obviously this is also an avodah. And the Gemara talks about the value of learning Torah in private. This is so here we have Sayin in mitzvahs, Hatznei alachas, b'mistarim tifka, crying and davening, kol ha'isik b'Torah. So we have the three primary Torah, avodah, gemilas, chasadim. And there's the value of privacy, and this all comes from Gevura. Because Chesed, as we'll see soon, Chesed is about expansiveness. Chesed doesn't know what it means to be in a box. Chesed is overflowing. Chesed is bubbly, alive, and Chesed can't be constrained. The idea of privacy is the idea of constraining and confining. And this is a part of Avodas Hashem. Avodas Hashem with Gevura,
Why is it you define it as Gevura?
Because Gevura, as I said, Gevura means limitation and concealment.
So you need Gevura for that.
That is Gevura, not you need Gevura, that is Gevura.
By definition.
Yes, that when we talk about above Chesed and Gevura, Chesed means revelation, Chesed means out of the box, Chesed means expansiveness, Gevura means constriction. It's the opposite of that. And And as we're seeing over here, one practical example of that is the idea of my relationship with Hashem is a very private and personal one. And I don't advertise it. Whatever I do is Hatznei Alachas, it's in a private way. If I need a cry, and a cry is a release of emotions, it's in private. Learning Torah is in private. We saw this very much by the Rebbe. You know, there are many tapes of the Rebbe speaking by Farbrengen, Sichas, Mamarim. We have some tapes of the Rebbe davening also for the Amud, although not many. The Rebbe only davened, was only Chazan when he was a Chiyuv. In other Chassidish courts, I believe it's much more common for the Rebbes to daven on different occasions. The Rebbe davened for his father's yahrzeit, his mother's yahrzeit, his wife's yahrzeit, and his father-in-law's yahrzeit. The Friedrich Rebbe, that's it. And obviously also then he davened the whole year for the Amud, 11 months after his mother passed away and after his wife passed away. And also, we don't have many tapes of, but the Rebbe would also get the maftir every single Shabbos, and sometimes the Rebbe would cry. Sometimes he would cry during maftir. There's some tapes of the Rebbe crying during davening, and also during Farbrengens. And the one thing that sticks out, and is very obvious, that whenever the Rebbe is crying, it's despite the Rebbe's the best efforts not to. And he's trying. The Rebbe is trying to compose himself, and the Rebbe will often stop. And you can tell that in those occasions when the Rebbe is crying, it's because literally he can't hold himself back. You see, the Rebbe will stop speaking. The Rebbe's voice will shake a little. He'll stop. He'll wait. He'll try to compose himself. This idea of mistarim tifka, of not wearing our emotions on our sleeves, and because our emotions are private. There are a lot of stories. Obviously, there's the idea of the tzaddikim nistarim. That's the whole avodah of a tzaddik nistar, is serving Hashem in private. And just two stories on this topic. Both of which I heard from Reb Mendel Merazov, who was the Rebbe of Rabbi Yochanan's his grandfather. So one story, there was the Tzemach Tzedek, was the third Rebbe of Lubavitch. He passed away in the year 1866. And the Tzemach Tzedek had 7 sons. Of the 7 sons, 1 son predeceased him. So when he passed away, he had 6 sons. Of the remaining 6, 1 of them did not become a Rebbe. That was actually his oldest son. The oldest son chose not to become a Rebbe. His oldest son, his name was Reb Baruch Shalom. However, he is the great grandfather of our Rebbe. So that means his great grandson eventually, the Nesias came back. So that leaves you with 5 sons. Of the 5 sons, 1 of the sons got married into the Chernobyl Chassidish Rebbeim, and he became a Rebbe, but not a Chabad Rebbe. He actually followed in his father-in-law's path and was a Rebbe in the way of the Chernobyl tradition. That left with 4 sons. Okay, so 1 son passed away, 1 son didn't become a Rebbe, 1 son was a Chernobyl Rebbe, so there were 4 sons who became Chabad Rebbes. One of them was a Rebbe in Kapust, 1 of them in Niezhin, 1 in Liadi, and the youngest son remained the Rebbe in Lubavitch, and he was the Rebbe Maharash. The youngest son was the one who remained in Lubavitch, because that's what the Tzemach Tzedek left in his will, that my only child who should say Chassidus in Lubavitch is Reb Shmuel, the youngest one. And it is to the youngest one, that's what the Lubavitch tradition continued. But you had 4 sons, and all of them were incredible tzaddikim. All of them were very great tzaddikim. Actually, mamish, in the last few months, there came out a book, a sefer, a biography of all the sons of the Tzemach Tzedek and the dynasties that they established. We're all talking about incredibly holy people. And after the Tzemach Tzedek passed away, a lot of the Chassidim didn't know, we have 4 sons here, all of them are becoming Rebbes, who do I go to? In Lubavitch, this wasn't something which was so usual. In other words, I know in other Chassidim it is more usual for the Chassidim to split up. In Lubavitch, it doesn't. That was the biggest instance of that happening. And in fact, the 4th Lubavitcher Rebbe, the Maharash of Shmuel, the amount of Chassidim that came to him was almost nothing compared to what his father had. The Lubavitch really, at that time, Chabad really divided up. And Rebbe Maharash had very few Chassidim, and it took a long time, took many years, a few decades before Lubavitch built it back up. And eventually the other dynasties also, they all petered out, and everyone eventually came back to Lubavitch. But at that time, many Chassidim had a very big dilemma where to go, who to go to. The oldest son of the second oldest son, his name is the Maharil. He was known as an incredibly holy person. I was just reading about him in this book, that when he would daven, people would go crazy from his davening, and he himself would enter a trance-like state, and he would be running around the room this way and that way, had no idea what's going on, and he would daven for hours and hours on end. And the problem became, this is the oldest son, the problem became that when his mother passed away, he had to daven for the Amid. So he has to be the Chazan. So he decided that until Yishtabach he's going to daven by himself. And then from Yishtabach he'll go for the Amid. But it didn't work because he went for the Amid and he totally lost himself, and he would be, he's the Chazan then. He's running around the room and he's davening and going very slow, completely fadvekit in a trance, and he lost his minyan. And no one wanted to come to his minyan. So he promised the people to know, okay, come back to the minyan and I'll control myself. In fact, he said, I'm going to take a gartel, I'm going to tie myself to the stender with a gartel so that I don't, that I have to stay there in place. And that's what he did. He tied himself to the stender with a gartel, and the next day during davening, he was busy running around the whole shul, dragging the stender along with him, because he was tied. So we're talking about incredibly holy people. So there was one young man at that time, and his name was Reb Shmuel Greinem. Reb Shmuel Greinem Esterman was his full name. He's known better classically as Greinem. By Chassidim, a lot of times you even drop the Reb. He was known as Greinem, and his claim to fame is that some 30 years later, when the Rebbe Rashab established the Lubavitch Yeshiva of Temchet Mimim, he tapped him, this Reb Greinem, to be the first mashpia of the yeshiva. And in fact, we all over here owe Reb Greinem a big debt of gratitude. And why is that? Because in Yeshiva on Temchet Mimim, he was the one who taught Tanya. Everyone who teaches Tanya today is pretty much the student of the student of the student of Reb Greinem. So Reb Greinem, he had his biurim on Tanya. And if you look right behind you over there, you see a red book that says Biur ala Tanya. You want to pull it out for a second? Fifth from the, I would go, but
Third book.
I'm attached. That shelf, the fifth. No, underneath, to your right, red. To your right, not to your right, there. Yeah, that one. Take it out. So you see this sefer says Biur ala Tanya, Maha Mashpia Rav Chassid Reb Shmuel Greinem Esterman. Okay, so this is, and he basically taught all his students how to understand Tanya. And all the biurim that we have in the Maseder are pretty much, they come from him. This is the collected from his students who wrote his biurim on Tanya. So actually, we're beneficiaries of this Reb Greinem. This Reb Greinem was a young man when the Tzemach Tzedek passed away. Temchet Mimim was started in 1897, and that's when he became the Mashpia. It was established in 1897. Here we're talking about 1866. So this is 30 years beforehand. He's a young man, maybe in his late teens, maybe in his 20s, and he doesn't know who to go to. He doesn't know which of the Rebbes to go to. So he had a Mashpia. The Mashpia's name was Rabbi Shmuel Ber of the city of Barisov, known as Rabbi Shmuel Ber Barisover. So he went to his Mashpia and said to his Mashpia, what do I do? Who do I go to? 4 options over here. So his Mashpia told him, I can't tell you who to go to. Kulam Mahuvim, Kulam Berurim, Kulam Geberim, Kulam Kadeshim, they're all holy, they're all beautiful. And you can't go wrong. It's a win-win situation. You can't go wrong. However, Shmuel Ber says, I'll tell you, I'm going to go to the Rebbe Maharash. I'm going to Rebbe Shmuel, the youngest one. And I'll tell you why I'm going to him, and then you'll make your own choice what you want to do. He said that it once happened that I was by the Rebbe in Lubavitch, the Tzemach Tzedek, and Shabbos he said Chassidus, and in the Chassidus, in the Maimer that he said, he quoted a Pri Eitz Chaim from the Arizal. And it's a difficult piece in the Pri Eitz Chaim, and obviously the Rebbe was trying to give a beer on it, and I didn't understand, and I had a question on it, I didn't understand it. So after the Maimer, I went to each one of the Rebbe's children, and I asked them for explanation. And each one of them tried to explain, but didn't go. But I didn't go to the Rebbe Maharash, I didn't go to Rebbe Shmuel. Rebbe Shmuel, he was the youngest one. And if the older ones were all considered to be big tzaddikim, he was considered to be a businessman. No one really thought too highly of the Rebbe Maharash. So I didn't think of going to him, especially if his older brothers didn't know the answer to the question. I wasn't going to go to him. So I'm walking home. It's already late at night after I had made my rounds by all the Rebbe's children. I'm walking home, and I pass by the courtyard of the Tzemach Tzedek, and I see that in the house of the Rebbe Marash, because by the way, the Rebbe Marash, the Tzemach Tzedek very much endeared him. He was the only one who lived in the courtyard of the Tzemach Tzedek. And the Rebbe Marash, I see the light is still on in the house. It was late at night. So I was curious. So I went to the window, I look inside, and I see that he's sitting there with a Pri Eitz Chaim. And the Pri opened to the page, the exact page of that part which I was having difficulty with. Okay, so I go around to the front door, I knock on the door, I hear from inside, the Marash says, "Who's there?" I said, Reb Shmuel Ber. He says, "Wait 1 second, give me a minute." 2 minutes later, the door opens, I walk in. Pri Eitz Chaim is not on the table anymore. The table has a few newspapers on it. Open newspapers. So he meets me at the door and says, "How can I help you, Reb Shmuel Ber?" He says, "I had a question on the Maimer your father said yesterday, and Pri Eitz Chaim." And Rebbe Marash says, "Reb Shmuel Ber, you making a joke out of me? What do you want from me, a Pri Eitz Chaim? Go ask my brothers. What do I know about a Pri Eitz Chaim? I have my older brothers. They know much better than me." So Shmuel Ber said, "Listen, I went to your older brothers. I didn't get from them a satisfactory answer. And if you're not going to give me an answer, I'm going to go tomorrow. I'm going to tell everyone what I saw here tonight." the game that you played without switching the Pri Eitz Chaim for the newspapers, and I'll blow your cover. So everyone says, okay, you know what, Beseda, I'll give you the answer, but you can't tell anyone. You can't tell anyone what you saw. And he gave him an answer, and that answer was mamish. It took away all of his questions. And Shmuel Ber said, "I've never said the story to anyone before, but since now that you're asking which Rebbe to go to, I'm explaining to you this is why I'm going to Rebbe Shmuel, to Rebbe Marash." Now, just interestingly, I told you I heard the story from Reb Mendel Merazov. Reb Mendel's father was one of the first students in Temrit Yemim. He arrived in the summer of 1897 when it opened. He arrived, and he heard the story from Reb Greinem, and he told it to his son Reb Mendel, and I heard it from Reb Mendel. So it's not a tradition, it's not a cliché, but there's the direct line from where that story emerged from, and that is the idea of the mistarim, the idea of the value of tznius, the value, and that comes from gevura, not from chesed. It comes from constriction and limitation, and that's an important derech in avodas Hashem. Another story I once heard from Reb Mendel, or every story I heard from him I didn't hear once, I heard several times from him, because as he got older he would repeat himself, which is good, this way you remember it, because you hear a story once, you don't remember it. He says, in the times of the Alter Rebbe created a task force staffed by big Talmidei Chachamim, and their job was, you know, at that time there was tremendous opposition to Chassidus at that time, and it was difficult to make inroads and to get people to start learning Chassidus. So their job was to go into the different cities where Chassidus was not yet popular, where there are what we call misnagdim. Today really there aren't any misnagdim, but back then there were misnagdim. And to speak to the big goinim and try to get some of the big goinim over there to start learning Chassidus. That was their job. So these people themselves were big goinim themselves, otherwise they had to earn the respect of the people they were talking to. And they had a degree of success, and there were many big Talmidei Chachamim who became Chassidim because of this. But when that happened, it wasn't a simple story. Because when that happened very often, it was almost a catastrophe in the family. Sometimes the family would tear kriya and sit shiva and cut off any connections. It was serious stuff back then. The snaglus to Chassidus. It took another 2 generations for the ice to melt, and Chassidim and Snaglim started coexisting and respecting each other. But they were talking about still in the late 1700s, when it was still at the height of the machlokes. Sometimes there were divorces that came about because of that, because a woman couldn't stand that her husband now became a chassid. And there was it's not so funny actually, but it was sad. There was one time, there was a person, a big Talmid Chacham, and he became a chassid. And the mother-in-law, she says, no, I'm not giving up on this. I'm going to go to Liadi, and I'm going to go to the Alter Rebbe, and I'm going to get my son-in-law back. So she did that. She went to Liadi and she got herself an appointment with the Alter Rebbe. And she comes into the Alter Rebbe and the Alter Rebbe says, "No, how can I help you?" She says, "I want my son-in-law back. He became a chassid. I want him back." Alter Rebbe says, "What's bothering you? He became a chassid. What's so terrible?" So she said, "I'll tell you what's so terrible. It used to be that he used to sit in a shed in the back of the house, and he used to learn 18 hours a day. He still sits in the shed, but now he just reads newspapers over there."
Huh? Oh, that's terrible.
So you took away my son. Is that right? Alter Rebbe says, you have to understand. Your son-in-law, before he became a chassid, was also reading newspapers. Not all the time, but some of the time. And he also had the sefer there, and whenever he heard someone coming, he was worried maybe it's the shviger, or maybe it's the wife. Quickly the newspapers went onto the table and he opened up his Gemara. Sometimes it was the shviger, sometimes it was a cat who happened to be walking by, quickly put away the newspaper and then opened his Gemara. He says, now it's the opposite way around. Now your son is sitting and learning a whole day. And when he hears someone coming, he puts away the Gemara and opens up the newspaper. Says it used to be that your son-in-law was learning Gemara for the shviger and for the cat. The cat that scratched. And now he's learning Gemara for L'Shem Shamayim. But I want to point something out. There's a Hayom Yom which talks about V'hatznei alachas in Mashem Alikecha, where the Rebbe cites the Frierdiker Rebbe who says that Chassidim, they would be literally hayu mitztarim. They would work very hard that their Avodas Hashem should be private, what we call without blitis. That's at least in Chabad, that's how we call it. You know, esrog has blitis, has bumps, but a blitter literally means something that sticks out. So when someone
stick out, show off.
Right. So it's a blitis, right? In Chabad, that's what's called. You talk about someone having blitis, that means that they're showing off. There's a bump over there, it's sticking out. And Chassidim worked very hard that people should not be aware of their Avodas Hashem, and if other people did find out how you mitztarim, they literally it pained them. And we all know there's this idea of anova, right? I don't want to be an arrogant person. I don't want to be a prideful person. So therefore, if I'm serving the Eibishter, if I'm learning, I'm davening, I'm doing mitzvahs behider, so really, I would like everyone to know about it. That's the truth. However, that's gaiva. And I know that if I do it in private, then I'm an anov, and then I'm a bigger tzaddik, and then I get also more schar and Gan Eden. That everyone knows. And I think that's popular in the world. No one is surprised when we say there's importance of doing things b'seisar, but why? Because I have to be an anav, and because again, a bigger tzaddik, and I get more schar. When the Rebbe says that the Chassidim would be mitztayer, they would have pain when they were found out. It's not because, if you're doing it, by the way, let's say you're hiding because you want to be an anav, and someone happens to see you, then what? Then you get all excited. Why? I was trying to be an anav, so I still got the schar and Gan Eden. And even better, now people even know about it. So I'm good on both sides. I get the schar and Gan Eden, I'm an anav, and also I have the publicity, and everyone knows what kind of tzaddik I am. Right? No, but Chassidim, when people will find out about it, they'll be mistayer. Because Chassidim weren't trying to be, it's not that they were trying to be a bigger tzaddik. The idea of Hatznei Alachas is not that you're being a tzaddik, it's not that you're trying to be an anav. It's not that you want more schar and Gan Eden. It's not that at all. It's when your relationship with Hashem is a very personal one, a very meaningful one. It's private. And broadcasting it actually cheapens it. If I have a real relationship with Hashem, then it's about me and Him. You know, today, the formal world, we don't have any public displays of affection. In the Goyish world, they have that. Is that a tznius issue? Yeah, it's a tznius issue. But there's something, if I have a relationship with someone, it's between me and that person. And it actually cheapens it when someone else, imagine you have someone who's a very close, a very dear friend, and you write him a letter, and you're vulnerable in the letter, and you share your feelings, and then it's taken and someone prints it on newspaper. How would you feel?
Terrible.
Why? You didn't say anything private. You didn't say anything embarrassing, anything shameful. Why would that bother you? Because the privacy has been breached. Your relationship has been breached. And what makes it special is that it's private. That's what makes it special. And when something is out in the public, it cheapens the whole thing. And the same thing is if we have a relationship with the Eibishter, and if it's really about that, and it's not about anyone else, then you don't want it to be revealed. Not because you want to be an Anav, and not because you want to be a Tzaddik, and not because you want to get Schar and Gan Eden, but because you're in something real. And when you're in something real, you don't want anyone to know about it. You don't need anyone to know about it. It's you and Hashem. The outcome might be the same. The outcome meaning that there's the Hatznei Aleches of being in private, but the motivation is very different. When I'm doing it because I want to be an Anav. Oh, I did a mitzvah. That's number one. Number two, I'm also going to be an Anav. No, stays. Doubly good. No, it's not that. It's not I'm doing a mitzvah and I'm being an Anav. I'm doing a mitzvah. It's about me and Hashem, and I don't need to advertise it. It's something which is personal. But this comes, yeah.
That's beautiful, but if I do chesed and I tell people about it, they'll learn from me and they will do it too.
Okay. I hear. Hold your thought. Hold your thought. As I said, this is the midah of Gevurah. I know you for a few years and you have very little connection to Gevurah. So we'll talk about chesed. When we get to chesed, we'll talk about that. Okay? So outcome number one, someone who has a neshama, which comes from Gevurah, outcome number one is that they're introverted. They're in the box, they're introverted, they're concealed, and it's about them and Hashem. That's number one. V'hinei, back inside, around five lines from the top of the beginning of the page. V'hinei midah zu nimshcha gam ken b'chinas hatzimtzum v'agvul. From this midah of Gevurah also comes tzimtzum v'agvul b'avodas Hashem. From here also comes constriction and limitations in Avodas Hashem. Kamei, for example, b'tzedakah. When it comes to tzedakah, liyes nidain behesed yad. Tzedakah, how much tzedakah do you have to give? Well, how much can you afford? But that's a limitation. V'amevazvez al yivazvez yeser mechoimish. The idea of not giving more than 20% is tzedakah. Ukahai gavna. The same thing is also when it comes to Talmud Torah. Learning Torah, V'shari mitzvahs, or all other mitzvahs. Dailoi, for a person who has a Gevurah neshama, it's enough for them sheyoytze yidei chivasei, that they fulfill their obligation. Mechiyav mefura shechiyafti ha-Torah, with the precise obligation that the Torah obligates him. Beferish lekvoya item chulum. You look at Shulchan Aruch, how much they have to learn, and then all the other mitzvahs. That is Gevurah. Because again, Gevurah is limitation and constriction. So it expresses itself in privacy, but also in the boxness. What do I have to do? And I will do that. However, b'chinas yamin, the right side, and the neshama is to come from the right side. Himidas ha-chesed v'hispashtus b'avodas Hashem. Chesed is hispashtus, is the opposite. Hispashtus means
Prolific.
Expansiveness, right? Out of the box. B'ishrachvus, it's again expansiveness. Belid simtzum v'hester klal. There's no restriction. There's no hiddenness. Kameshakosov, as the pasuk says, v'eshalcha bercha v'chulu. David HaMelech says, I go in the middle of the street. I don't walk on the sidewalk. I don't walk on the side. When I walk, I go barchava. Right? I'm out in the open. I'm not hiding anywhere. When I do a mitzvah, it's in the public. When I learn Torah, it's in the public. Not because I'm looking for publicity, but because the idea of constriction and hiddenness and concealment for someone who's from the genre of chesed, that doesn't work. Everything by that person is in a way of expansiveness and revelation. That's chesed. Umimena nimshach gamkein. And also from chesed comes Masha Amar Razal, that which our Chachamim say, Ziroi Kumara b'talmidim chulu, strike fear into your students. Now, if you look into the parentheses, the one who brought this to print, the ones who brought this, the Tanya to print, write Tzarech Chiyun. It's hard to understand. It seems it seems this idea of striking fear in the students, it's a mistake. As we know, as we've mentioned in the past, that the Tanya was printed not off the actual manuscript that the Alter Rebbe wrote, but off what's called HaKodesh, which are copies, and sometimes there were mistakes. So it appears that this is a mistake. The idea of striking fear in a student should belong in the Gevura, and now we're in Chesed. Yeah. However, I do want to point out that although the publishers felt it was a mistake, they didn't fix it. Which shows a certain degree of humility and respect that maybe there's something we don't understand. Maybe Taka is Reik Marabah Talmid, and maybe it is Chesed. It doesn't seem to me, but maybe the Alter Rebbe had some sort of idea which is beyond us, so they didn't have the chutzpah to move it, although they felt that it was a mistake. And again, even though that it's not even the actual manuscript, the actual Ksav Yad of the Alter Rebbe was a copy. But Lepoya, looking around, I have not found anyone who disputes this. In other words, I have not found any pshat explaining how Zreik Marabah Talmidim could be a din in actual chesed. So it does seem that it was a mistake, but the text remains as it is. V'gamen also believed tzimtzum ugvul klal. A person from a chesed, their service of Hashem has no limitation. Ve'ein matzeh l'ruch nedvaseh. There's nothing stopping that person's sense of giving, that what's in the nedivus, the person is feeling the generosity. Bein b'tzedakah, whether comes that this person is giving tzedakah more than he can afford. Or bein b'talmud Torah v'shari mitzvahs. Everything is 110%. Such a person is not content just to fulfill their obligation. Ella ad bli dai chulu. But this person, ad bli dai, everything has to be beyond now. So here we have these two. Alter Rebbe finished describing two different types of neshamas. One neshama that comes from Gevura, and one neshama which comes from Chesed. And again, the neshama comes from Gevura is defined by constrictedness and limitation and concealment and introvertedness. A neshama that comes from Chesed is extroverted, expansive, unlimited. And the main thing to remember is there's no good or bad. Both of these are midas of Kedusha. Chesed and Gevura are both holy. They're both the midas of Hashem. When we daven, we say, Hakel, HaGodel, v'HaGiber. Godel is midas of Gedula, is midas of Chesed. Giber is midas of Gevura. And these are both holy neshamas.
Could a person have both Gevura and Chesed?
That's a good question. V'hinei kol ish Yisrael tzarech li yiskol mebeis b'chines elu.
That was quick.
Every Yid has to have both of these bechinas. By the way, you have the answer to your question, right? You asked about. There's another point also, which is that it's possible that sometimes even someone who comes from the side of Gevura and therefore wants to be at Snei Alachas, that'll have Mesiras Nefesh and he won't do at Snei Alachas. There's the Rashba says mitzvah lefarsam oisei mitzvah. Famous Shuvas Rashba. What?
She was trying to bring out that point.
Mitzvah lefarsam oisei mitzvah. What happened with Snei Alachas? What happened with Snei Alachas? But sometimes when you mefarsam a mitzvah, so
set an example.
Yeah.
You want to set.
So I would like to do Atznei Alachas. Actually, it seems more intimate with Hashem when I do Atznei Alachas. Okay,
that's your nature.
But sometimes you have to have overcome. What I'm saying is that when someone does mitzvahs in public, it can be two reasons. Either because Taki has a neshama from Chesed, and Chesed doesn't go together with privacy and with restriction and constriction and all that introvertedness. Chesed is I'm out in the open, right? But even someone who has neshama of Gevura can also sometimes make the decision that even though I would like to be at Snei Alachas, but nevertheless, for the greater good, don't. I see it all the time. You go on these charity campaigns, anonymous. Stop it with anonymous. Put your name.
That's the idea behind making public pledges.
Sorry?
That's the idea behind.
Yeah. Umimenu yiru v'chein yasu. Right. Let people see it. And I know this personally because I also have a desire to do anonymous when I do it. I don't. I used to a long time ago. Then I realized it's not the way to do it. Let people see my name, and if that he gave, maybe I'll give also. Then it's all worth it. Okay, but now every single Yid has to have both. Why?
Both what?
Chesed and Gevura.
So they both have. One tap is.
You asked if you can have both. Not you could. Every Yid has to have both. Why is that? Because one without the other is extreme. I'll give you an example. Do you want your doctor to be chesed or gevura? What does a chesed doctor look like, and what does a gevura doctor look like? So again, gevura is in the box, limited, restricted, and chesed is out of the box, creative, giving, flowing. So you go to your gevura doctor, and he's going to tell you, this is what I read about it. You have to do this and this and this and this, and there's no exceptions, and everything is very rigid, and I have to do 9 tests on you, and maybe this and maybe that. A chesed doctor is, I know it says that. I know it says that you can't take more than 1 Tylenol, but if you take 2, it's not going to kill you. Like a chesed, and you say you want to go on a chves to your niece's wedding, and you're not really feeling so well. Maybe it's it's your niece. It's important. You'll go. You'll feel better just from going. Right? That's a chesed doctor. Now you can imagine. What if a doctor is only chesed or a doctor is only gevura? You want a doctor
combined.
Who has a balance. Who's a balance of chesed and gevura? Because either one alone is very extreme. I'll give you another example. Okay, so we have over here sitting by our table. We have a plumber. What's a chesed plumber? What's a gevura plumber?
You're supposed to answer.
When you ask the question, you're supposed to answer. No, it's ne'alechas. Answer. I'm asking you because you told me that you once worked by a gevura plumber, and then you went to a chesed plumber.
No, that's not. I was thinking of talking and giving you an answer.
Yeah.
But that wouldn't be anything to do with it. A chesed plumber is when he brings a 2-inch pipe to your faucet that when you turn it on, it'll be gushing out water. A gevura plumber would be giving you very.
So gevura plumber follows the code exactly and everything, right? To the T. And comes back, by the way, you have to be 8 to 9 to 5, and if you're coming 9-10, they're going to dock you a little from your pay if that's your ball, right? It's a certain thing. The chesed plumber is you come a little late, leave a little early. You come to a job and you tell the person, the truth is that according to code, you have to have an inch, which is, but you know what, I think it'll cost you $200 less. You could probably get away with a little a pipe that's a little thinner. And then what happens 2 years later when the pipe, right? Now, so what do you want? Do you want a chesed, when you hire someone, do you want a chesed plumber or a gevura plumber? You want someone, hopefully, that has a balance, right? So you want both. You want both. And every yid has to have both. And the ein lecha davar she'ein lo makom. There's no such thing, there's no thing that doesn't have a place. In other words, in our life, there's a place for chesed, there's a place for gevura, for every single one of us. There's sometimes when we should be atznei alechas, and there's sometimes when we should be vasalcha berchava, sometimes when we should be doing things in private, and sometimes when we go and dance on the street. And there's sometimes when we have to say stuck and no, I have to be within my limits over here, and sometimes there's a time when chesed, each one has its place.
Subject to your discretion.
Sorry?
Subject to with each individual's
discretion, understanding that life is about a combination of both. And therefore we find we find in the Masechtas Iggeres, we find that even though we know that in general Beishamai and Beishamai is Machmir and Beisilo is Mekel. And why is Beishamai Machmir? Because Beishamai's neshamas were sourced in Gevura, and Beisilo was Mekel because his neshamas, their neshamas were sourced in Chesed. Nevertheless, we find that sometimes Beishamai is Mekel and Beisilo is Machmir. And why is that? And the point being over here that we have this hiskalolus, that even in Kedusha, it's not either or. Yes, as we'll see soon, everyone has a dominant midah of either chesed or gevura, but Beis Shammai, whose midah was whose dominant midah was gevura, they also had chesed, and that's why sometimes they were mekel. And Beis Hillel, whose dominant midah was gevura, was chesed, he also had gevura, which is called a balance. That's what a balance really is. Let's do this inside. Sha'af Beis Shammai, even Beis Shammai, Shesheish Nishmasam B'chinas Meilel, Beis Shammai was from gevura. And by the way, Beis Shammai was extreme gevura, and Beis Hillel was extreme chesed. Nevertheless, each one of them had the other one also. And therefore, you done Allah Hachmir Tamid. That's why Beis Shammai was Machmir. B'chol Yisuri HaTorah. Ubeis Hillel, Shoyim B'chinas Yimina Elyon Beis Hillel. Their neshamas were sourced in the right side above. How you malabdim schus they would be Malamis Chuslach, Isuri Beishamai. They wanted to be matir, they wanted to allow and permit that which Beishamai forbade. So they should be freed from their state of incarceration, and they can be elevated above, which is very interesting. I know we've talked about this once in the past, because Dr. Rebbe mentions it around twice, two or three times in Tanya. When Beis Hillel was being makel, okay, it's not that, oh, that meat, you know what, I'll be easy on you, it's kosher. And Beis Shammai says, no, I'm hard on you, I'm machmer. Beis Hillel was being makel on the meat, and Beis Shammai has been machmer on the meat. Meaning, when there's a shayla on a meat, who has the biggest stake over here? The meat. The meat which wants that a yid should come and make a bracha on it and elevate it. And if you aser it, if you say that it's aser also means tied down. It remains tied down. The word aser means tied down, and it can't be elevated to kedusha.
Yeah.
And Beis Hillel says no mutter. Mutter means untied. No, go eat it. Now, if you can't eat this chicken, which is treif, you'll eat another chicken. Beis Hillel wasn't worried about you. Beis Hillel was worried about the chicken. We mentioned. Usually we think Beis Shammai was the nice guy. He's being nice. Beis Hillel was the nice guy, being nice stuff. Beis Shammai was being. There's a story which we said the story in the past that there was. Let's remember how the story goes.
The lady.
Sorry.
The lady with the meat.
Someone came to a Rav with a shayla on a piece of, on an animal that was shechted, and he paskined. The Rav paskined that it's kosher. So they came over to him. Someone came over to him after and says, "But the Taz paskins that is treif." I guess the Machoikis, Taz and others, the Taz paskins is treif. He says, "When I come up to heaven after 120 years, there are two possibilities. If I paskin that it's kosher, so then the Taz is going to pull me to the Torah and say, how you talking? That you paskin that it's kosher when I said that it's treif. If I paskin that it's treif, then after 120, the cow is going to pull me to the Torah and say, how you talking? How is it that you didn't allow me to be elevated? I'd rather go to the Torah with the Taz than to go to the Torah with the cow." So Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, that was their standard operation, was that Beis Shammai was machmer, and that's gevura, because gevura is, no, you're not good enough. Gevura is, if there's a problem over there, it can't be elevated. Gevura rejects, gevura pushes away. Chesed is expansive, and it's allowing everyone in. So Beis Hillel was always matir and mekel, and Beis Shammai was always machmer. Afa pikein, and nevertheless, bekamad dvarim in many areas, how you Beis Shammai mekilin, Beis Shammai be mekel. Why is that? Because in the shayrish of the neshama, there's hiskalulus. Hiskalulus is a word which we've bumped into many times, that in kedusha, there is no one English word to translate it, but there's no word. When things are included in each other, chesed contains gevura. What?
Intertwined.
Yeah, okay. Integration maybe would be a good word to use. Intertwined, integrated. So shukal gamimin, the shayrish of the neshama, which is gevura, also contains yimin, also contains chesed. V'chein shayrish nishmas Beis Hillel kol gam bismail. The shayrish of the neshama Beis Hillel also contains from the left side ki yadua derech umidas kodesh elyon, as is known, the way of the midas of above, the less tamon kitzutz upirut chas Hashem. In the midas of Hashem, there is no kitzutz, which means there is no severing, upirut or separation. V'chol hamidas klulei zu mazu by Hashem, chesed and gvura, they're contained within each other, as you know by Sfir Seimer, chesed sheba chesed, gvura sheba chesed, chesed sheba gvura. V'lachein hem yichadei zu bezu, and that's why they are united one with another, ki yadu al yedichein, as is known by those who know Kabbalah. Yeah.
Mashiach come, so Bet Shammai, it be chesed, and Bet Hillel, it be gvura.
No.
Because everything, it be like Bet.
When Mashiach comes, gevura will be the more dominant midah, which is why Mashiach comes, Allah will be like Beis Shammai. But that's not for discussion for now. We spoke, if you want, you can go back and listen to Perik, when we learned Perik Nun and Tanya, we had a whole discussion about that. And now, connecting a little to the Parsha, but inside we don't know, we don't have to close the Tanyas. Look at the see Avram, as we know, it says by Avram. Shahumi, this the week we get introduced to Avram. Shahu midas hachesed via avo. Avram was the paragon of the midah of chesed and ava. And what does it say about Avram? Ato yodati kirei elokim mata. Avram also had yira. Because he used his gvura of a HaKodesh Yitzchak Benoy, and he tied up his son Yitzchak vayikach samachalas, and he took the knife. Chulu. Now Avram had 10 tests. So not in this week's parsha, but in the next week's parsha, we have, it says over there that Avram, after the bris milah, on the third day after his bris milah, it's hot, and he's obviously in pain. He's 99 years old, shara bris, and he's sitting outside his tent and he's waiting for guests. But that's not one of the tests. You'd think one of the tests is Hashem tells Avram, do a bris milah, and I'll make it hot, and I'll see if you're still going to do achnasa sarchem. It's not a test. Why isn't it a test? Because for Avram, that's not a test. Why? Because Avram is chesed.
That was his nature.
So obviously, chesed is going to be looking for urchem. To test someone, the idea of a test is you have to do something which is against your nature. All of the nisyonos, Avram going against his nature. So we have this week's parsha begins Vayemer Hashem el Avram, lach lecha, leave. Now, for someone who's a gevura person, who's an introvert, and you go tell him, okay, time to move to another state, another country, he's like, okay. No. Today you have this concept called FOMO. You ever heard the...
What's that?
FOMO, fear of missing out.
Missing out, yeah.
A gevura person never has FOMO. Like if your family is sitting and talking and you go to sleep and then you have FOMO. What are they talking about? Not that you're scared of talking about you. You just want to be part of it, right? A gevura person doesn't have any FOMO. A gevura person's introverted. He's not. He lives within himself. There's a constriction limitation. A gevura person, you say, move to another country? Okay, no problem. A chesed person has developed relationships. You know, Avram Avinu was used to waving to the next door neighbor when he walked his dog every single day past his house, and he was busy being mekadev everyone. He was a networker. He was a connector. Avram Avinu. He had family over there, and now Hashem is telling him go to a new country, and there is no WhatsApp, and there is no FaceTime, and there is no garnish. You know, you're saying goodbye. Zeo. There wasn't even any Pony Express, I don't believe, back then. For a chesed person, that's hard. For a chesed person to pick up and to sever all your attachments and to go somewhere, that was an assignment. And obviously Avram passed that assignment with flying tests. But the ultimate test was when Hashem tells that Keda, which is Gevura. And when he finishes, Hashem says, Ata yadati kirei elokim mata. Now I know it. Now I know that you really serve me. Now I know you. It's not only chesed, but the Gevura also. So we see over here, so what did we learn today? To recap, there are two types of neshamas. There are those neshamas that are sourced in chesed. There are those neshamas that are sourced in Gevura. Each one of them is an avodah and kedusha. And ultimately both of us, all types of neshamas have to incorporate all. And we'll continue with Hashem next week.